Night story. This story is based on a tale published on Reddit that was sent to me via email. For nearly 21 years I served as a priest, and during my vocation, I acquired the training to perform exorcisms. A complex mission that requires unshakable spiritual strength and willpower. Not everyone is born to face evil eye to eye, resist its temptations and escape its attacks. All my experiences inside and outside those 2 decades of service, each deserve their own story. However, this one I'm about to tell is about my last job as a priest, the one that ended with me outside the church, carrying any number of traumas and nightmares all these years later. It was 1998. I had already been called on several occasions to perform liberation rites for residents who apparently all lived in the same building, which I found curious, as it indicated the central problem was in that place. I didn't have to try and figure it out. One morning, a case landed on my desk concerning a girl who wouldn't stop vomiting and speaking in different voices. It was as if several spirits were fighting for control over her body. One of them laughed in a playful yet macabre tone, like in those movies about evil clowns. Another voice, similar to a woman's, simply whispered disjointed phrases. But the one that seemed strongest when it manifested, remained silent and made the girl's childish eyes turn into the eyes of a threatening beast, making my skin crawl not only because they were monstrous, but because they were strangely familiar to me. The girl's mother said that, in a moment of carelessness, her daughter had accepted something from a young man who lived in that building, and since then she hadn't stopped behaving strangely. Fortunately, none of the spirits had managed to secure their possession, and it was enough to consecrate the girl for them to leave her body without much resistance. From that day on, I began sending requests to be allowed to check what was happening in that building. The authorization coincided with an emergency call from that same place. A young woman told me her life was in danger because her boyfriend had summoned a demon that wanted to kill them. Through my investigations, I had found that rituals and spiritual sacrifices had been practiced in this place for quite some time to seek power pacts with diabolical entities. At some point, it was a method used by influential people in the city to climb the ranks, either politically or in business. But now, it was about an open portal that curious young people had wanted to test. I arrived on a cloudy afternoon as if a storm was approaching, and I stood in front of the building waiting for someone to let me in. But everything looked dark and deserted, as if it had been evacuated. So I peered through the glass of the door, and the face of an anguished young woman suddenly appeared. I was going to signal for her to let me in, but it wasn't necessary. "Father, please help us," she said, crying. "My boyfriend and I started playing with some strange symbols in the basement, and now he's behaving erratically and says he has to sacrifice me. He's been sitting in the middle of a circle he drew on the floor. He doesn't say anything, only that he needs my blood. I'm scared, Father. I don't know why he's treating me like this. He was never violent with me before." The young woman, a skinny teenager with pale skin, had messy hair, scratch marks on her chest, bruised arms, and a red neck as if someone had tried to strangle her. "Did you call the police?" I asked her. "No, I don't want anything to happen to him because he's not like this," she replied. "Unfortunately, we need help," I said, "because this might be beyond my capabilities." The atmosphere that hung in the air was something I had never felt in my life. There was an incredibly strong pressure that provoked an uncontrollable fear in me. I hadn't even taken 2 steps inside the building, and my hands were already sweating. "And the other people who live here?" I asked. "Father, no one has lived in this building for years because they say it's cursed. We broke in because we knew people practice spiritism here and we wanted to try it, but we didn't know what we were getting into." That seemed even stranger to me as I had attended several cases of people who claimed to live there. I didn't understand what all this was about. Maybe it had all been planned, I wondered in my head. "I called the police," I insisted to her as I headed to where her boyfriend was. The entire building was dark. The only faint light on the first floor barely allowed you to make out the tiles in the hallway leading to the basement. Everything was silent, wrapped in a pestilent humidity, as if I were heading into a place full of dead animals in a state of decomposition. Furthermore, there was a suffocating heat that didn't match the weather that afternoon. What I saw when I finally arrived completely unsettled me. Something told me to run, to get out of there. I knew it wasn't a simple spiritism game. This was a monstrous power that surpassed everything I had ever faced. The young man from the case was lying in the middle of a circle drawn, apparently, with his own blood. He was illuminated by 3 enormous candles whose light flickered as if a draft were entering the place, which was impossible. He was half naked, barely covered by his underwear, hunched over on his hands and knees with his palms on the floor. His skin, which was apparently white, had turned gray with red blotches and some cut-like wounds from which large amounts of blood flowed. The young woman who had come down with me let out a small scream when she saw him and ran back, terrified, to the first floor. I only heard her footsteps fading down the hallway. I wanted to turn back too, but my conscience and my commitment to God wouldn't let me. The first thing I did was commend myself, invoking the angels, the Holy Spirit, and the powerful blood of our Lord to be my weapon and my defense against all lurking evil. For this and several prayers laid out in the Bible. I remember that when I finished, the young man's body twisted inside the circle, and in an inhuman way, he turned his head completely without changing the position of his torso. I had never witnessed such a manifestation. Fear was latent in my trembling hands and my unsteady voice, which was incapable of articulating a word. Suddenly, I mustered my courage and ordered him, by the power conferred upon me by the Holy Trinity, to tell me his name and what his intentions were. The demon just kept watching me while sketching a mocking grin, but after a second he started laughing hysterically without changing the position of his head. He laughed so loudly that the corners of the young man's mouth split open and bled, completely distorting his face. "You're an idiot, aren't you?" he said. His voice sounded familiar, but I didn't know from where. "You're a complete idiot, useless and corrupt," he told me. "What do you want from these young people?" I asked. "I don't know, ask them. They called me." "Or ask yourself, you're the one I invited and here you have come," he said. "I don't know you," I said, and I began the prayer of liberation with the Bible in my hand, sprinkling holy water around the place. I remember reading aloud while circling the area, and the demon just watched me attentively without showing the slightest discomfort. It was as if he was mocking me. "Are you done?" he asked. "You know I'm going to kill you, that I'm going to kill you all, that someone has to pay the price. But I'm kinder than you," he told me, "so I'll propose a deal to you." "I don't make deals with demons," I said. "I am a minister of God." "You're a joke. You're a corrupt man who deceives people." "But allow me to explain, dear father," he said. "Or may I call you Jay? As that woman you left alone used to call you?" He screamed desperately when he mentioned that. I was speechless. That encounter couldn't be accidental. The same demon had led me there without me realizing his presence, and now he had me cornered. My intercession had no power over him anymore because, in some way, he had orchestrated that situation. I kept the Bible in my hand, trying to continue with the exorcism, but my mind wasn't in the right state. I was terrified, confused, and wanted to flee. "I just want you to leave, Father," the demon told me. "Let me finish this. If you let me do it, I promise you will leave here alive, and later you will understand what is happening." By that point, I was questioning my work and my vocation. Was I really made for this? Was it worth giving my life for people who had sought evil for themselves? No, it wasn't worth it, I finally told myself. I want to live to have another life. What do I have to do? I asked him. The demon just let out a loud laugh, and in that moment, I understood I had fallen into his domain and that the protection that clothed me was gone. The putrefaction became more intense as my vision clouded, and I felt I was going to lose consciousness. At some point in my delirium, I don't remember exactly, the young woman came back down to that place. Almost sleepwalking, she entered the demon's circle, who plunged his hand into her abdomen and began to eat her entrails. That was the last thing I saw before passing out. I was in a coma for about 2 weeks. When I woke up, a few days later, I was notified of my dismissal from the church. Among the testimonies given by the young man who was facing a murder trial, was that I had made a pact with the demon. That was my downfall and my entry into depression and constant nightmares. But there was something I had to resolve. That woman the demon had mentioned could be the answer. And if everything fit, it was about a young woman with whom I had had a hidden relationship many years ago and whom I abandoned when I found out she was pregnant. I was just beginning my service as a priest. Over time, I was able to learn the details of the whole story, everything that happened to her when I changed cities and left her stranded. She had been thrown out of her house and was practically living on the street alone, pregnant and unprotected. She died victim of a cult that had been terrorizing the city, and her son, my son, had disappeared. More than 20 years had passed since then, and all the information I had managed to gather indicated that the possessed young man I had confronted in that building was him. He was now confined under extreme surveillance in a psychiatric center, having been diagnosed with schizophrenia for insistently claiming that everything he did was ordered by the spirit of his dead mother, and that the only one to blame for everything had been me.